She said it at 11 minutes past 9, which I know because I looked, because I always look, because that is a thing that happens to your brain after 14 years of the trade. You're not what I expected. I had a fork halfway to a plate and I put it down, because there is exactly one way that sentence goes, and I have been on the receiving end of it before. Right, no, that's fair, Finn. Georgia Mulvaney was doing something with her face that I could not read at all. You're not what I expected. You're better. I did not have anything to say to that. She waited. She is very good at waiting, which I did not know yet, and which is most of her job. And after about 4 seconds of me producing nothing, she picked her glass up and said, "You can just say thank you, it's allowed," and I said thank you, badly, and we carried on. I want to describe the 2 hours before that, because the line does not mean anything without them. I had been in that restaurant since 20 to 7 for a 7 o'clock table, which is 20 minutes of a man sitting in a car park in a shirt he had ironed twice. I had not been on a date since 2019. That is the number I did not tell her for 4 months. Not since 2019, and the one before that was 2017, and both of them were arranged by other people in the same way this one was. And both of them had produced exactly one further meeting and then a message that was kind. I had said yes to Rosie Keogh in April and then spent 11 weeks finding reasons, and the only reason it happened at all is that Rosie is 61 and stopped asking and simply told me a date and a time in a tone that did not have a question in it. The first 40 minutes were bad. I want that on the record because everybody assumes it was easy from the start, and it was not. I talked about watches. That is what I do when I am frightened. I go to the one subject where I know every single answer, and I stay there, and it is deadly. I got about 9 minutes into escapement design before I heard myself, and Georgia Mulvaney put her chin on her hand and said, "Can I stop you and ask something else?" God, yes, sorry. Don't apologize. It was interesting for about 6 minutes. She had not stopped looking at me. "But you've been talking for 9 and you haven't looked up once, and I do this for a living, so what are you actually nervous about?" Nobody had ever asked me that in my life. That is the whole date. Everything after that was the two of us talking properly for 2 hours in a restaurant that wanted to close. And at 11 minutes past 9, she said the things she said. I want to be clear that I did not believe her. Not for a second. Not that night, and not for the following 7 months. And everything that goes wrong in this story goes wrong out of that one fact. I'm Finn Quill, 32. I repair watches, which means I sit at a bench under a lamp for 9 hours a day, with a loop in my eye taking apart things that are older than my grandfather. I have a shop on Larkin Street with my name on the window. It was my father's before it was mine, and his uncle's before that. And I am the third Quill to sit at that particular bench, which is a sentence I used to enjoy saying. Georgia Mulvaney is a court interpreter, Spanish and Portuguese, mostly, in a courthouse 40 minutes from that town, and she has done it for 11 years. I did not understand the job at all until about our 4th conversation. I thought it was translation. It is not translation. It is standing in a room where somebody's housing or custody or liberty is being decided and saying their words in another language with total accuracy, in real time, adding nothing, softening nothing, under oath. She is not allowed to explain. That is the part that got me. If a man says something in Spanish that will damage his own case, she says it in English, exactly, and she is not permitted to look at him while she does it. 11 years, I said when I finally worked it out. 11 years. How many hours a day are you talking? 5. 6. It's not the hours. She had her arms folded. It's that none of it is mine. I have said probably 4 million words in that building, and not one of them was a thing I chose. She told me one other thing that night that I did not think about again for 11 months. We were arguing about a menu of all things. Some phrase on it that I said obviously meant one thing, and she said obviously meant another. And she got about 90 seconds into it before she stopped herself and laughed. Sorry, occupational injury. Go on. In that building, I am not allowed to assume what a word means. Ever. Not even the easy ones. She turned her glass. If a witness says, "He took it," I have to know whether the source language means took as in carried or took as in stole, because those are two different men and one of them goes to prison. That sounds exhausting. It's the whole job. She shrugged. Most disasters in paperwork start with one word everybody thinks they already understand. Nobody checks the easy ones. That's where they hide. I remember thinking it was a good line and filing it under things Georgia says. We were set up by a woman called Rosie Keough. Rosie is 61. She is a clerk at that courthouse, and she has been bringing me the same 1962 Omega for a service every 18 months since I took over the shop. She meant well. I want that on the record before I describe what she did. Because Rosie Keough is a good woman, and the entire course of my life runs through a favor she did badly. Here is what she told Georgia about me. He's a bit solitary, married to the work, doesn't really go out. And here is what she told me about Georgia. She's very quiet, keeps herself to herself, won't say much, so you'll have to carry it. Both descriptions were accurate as observations and completely wrong as information, and it took us about 4 months to work out why. Georgia is not quiet. Georgia is a woman who speaks for 5 hours a day at a level of precision that would flatten most people, and who arrives at 6 in the evening with nothing left in the tank at all. Rosie sees her in a corridor at 5:30. Rosie has been reading Exhaustion as personality for 4 years, and I am not solitary. I was, until I was 29, the man who organized things. I had a Tuesday 5-a-side. I ran the quiz at the pub on Larkin Street for 6 years, and there is a photograph somewhere of me doing something extremely stupid at somebody's 40th in 2018. Then the shop started going and I stopped doing all of it, one thing at a time, over about 18 months. Because a man who is frightened about money does not want to be in a room where people ask how business is. By the time Rosie described me to Georgia, the description was true. It had been true for 3 years. It just was not who I am. And there is a difference. And the difference is the whole of what follows. She said the thing on the first date, and I did not believe her, and I want to explain the mechanism properly because he had low self-esteem is lazy and is not what was happening. It was arithmetic. Georgia Mulvaney had been given a description of me. The description was, solitary, married to the work, doesn't go out. She had then sat across from a man for 2 hours who was, and I was that night, genuinely, funny and warm and interested, and she had drawn a conclusion. But I knew something she did not, which is that the description was correct, and the man at the table was a performance I could sustain for about 4 hours at a time. So when she said, "You're better," what I heard was, she has been given bad data and has now formed an impression on the basis of a 2-hour sample, and the sample is not representative, and at some point the population mean is going to assert itself. That is how a man who repairs watches thinks about being liked. I went out with her anyway, obviously, 7 months. I want to describe those 7 months because they were the best of my adult life, and I spent every single one of them waiting. We got on immediately and completely. Both of us do precise work with our hands and our attention, and it turns out that is a language. She understood, without me explaining it, why a thing can take 9 hours and be invisible. And I understood why she cannot talk on a Thursday. Thursdays are her heavy list. She told me in about week 3 that she would not be good company on Thursdays, and I said that was fine. And then I did something that she has since told me was the moment, which is that on the 4th Thursday, I turned up at her flat at 8 with food and did not say anything at all for about 90 minutes. We ate. I read. She sat on the other end of the sofa with her eyes shut. At about 9:30, she said, "You haven't asked me a single question. You said Thursdays are bad. Everybody says that's fine and then asks how my day was." She had not opened her eyes. "You have no idea what you've just done." I did know, roughly. It is the same as not talking to somebody who is doing a balance wheel. She met my mother in the March. I met her brother in the April, which took 40 minutes to arrange and 11 months for me to understand the significance of. Because Georgia Mulvaney does not introduce people. I want to give you one more thing from those 7 months, because it is the one I think about. February. She had a case that went badly. Not badly for her, badly in the room. A custody matter. A woman she had been interpreting for over 3 days. And a decision that came down in a way Georgia had been able to see coming since the Tuesday, and had had to sit through, saying every word of it, accurately, out loud, in that woman's language. She came to the flat at 9 and did not take her coat off for about 20 minutes. I said it to her, she said eventually. The judgment. I had to say the whole thing to her face in Spanish, and she was looking at me while I did it. That's the job. That's the job. She had her hands round a cup she was not drinking from. And I am not allowed to change one word of it. And I am not allowed to look away. And I am not allowed to say afterward that I'm sorry. I said the worst sentence of that woman's life in her own language, and then I picked up my bag. I did not say anything for a bit. Do you want me to say something, or do you want to sit here? That's the 3rd time you've asked me that. You've never answered it. Sit here, she said. So I sat there. About 2 hours. She fell asleep at some point around 11 with her coat still on, and I put a blanket over her and went and worked on something small at the second bench until 2 in the morning. And in the morning she said, "You didn't ask me about it." And I said no, and she said, "Thank you," and that was the entire conversation about it. That was February. And in the whole 7 months, I said nothing about the shop. Nothing. Not one sentence. She knew I had a shop, she had been in it, she had watched me work, and she did not know that the takings had halved in 4 years, that I had extended the overdraft twice, or that I had spent 11 months by then in what I would describe as a controlled, managed decline. I told myself the reason was that I did not want to bore her. That is not the reason. The reason is that the shop was the evidence. The shop was the population mean. And every month, I did not mention, it was another month before she got the data that would let her revise the assessment she had made at 11 minutes past 9 on a Tuesday in October. I was not hiding a business problem. I was hiding the thing I believed was true about myself, and the business problem was just where it happened to be written down. The night I finally told her was the 16th of May, and it went nothing like I had spent 7 months rehearsing. We were at my bench, not the shop. I have a second bench at the flat, smaller, for things I do for myself, and she had asked to watch, and I had said yes, which is not a small thing. I was working on a watch that has been in my possession for 3 years and does not belong to me. It came in 2021. A Longines 1948 in bad condition, brought in by a man in his 70s who paid the deposit and gave a number that stopped working about 6 weeks later. I sent 2 letters. The second came back, under the law. I could have sold it after a year. I have not sold it. I have serviced it twice. I keep it wound, and it sits in the 3rd drawer with a paper tag on it that says, "Collection. Hold." Georgia watched me put it back in the drawer. 3 years, she said. 3 years. Finn, he's not coming. I know he's not coming. So why? And then she stopped, and she looked at me. And I want to describe this because it is what she does, and it is extraordinary, and it is why she is good at what she does. She did not finish the question. She sat there and looked at me for about 6 seconds, and then asked a completely different one. What's happening with the shop? I did not have an answer ready, because I had not prepared for that route in, and it came out. All of it, in about 20 minutes, badly, at a bench, with a loop still in my hand. The takings, the overdraft, the 4 years, the 3 years of not going to the quiz on my own street, the specific arithmetic of a trade where the customers are dying faster than they are being replaced, and where the young ones want their watch fixed for $40 because they have a phone in their pocket that tells the time better. And at the end of it, I said the sentence I'd been carrying since October. So that's the actual me, I said. That's the thing Rosie was describing. She wasn't wrong, Georgia. She just described me in about 2022 instead of 2018, and neither of us noticed. Georgia Mulvaney sat on a stool in a small room and did not say anything for a long moment. Is that what you've been doing? She said. What? Since October. Is that what you've been doing every time I've said something nice to you? She had gone quite pale. Waiting to be found out? Because I've noticed something and I have not been able to name it for about 4 months, and you have just named it. She put both hands on her knees. Every single time I say a good thing about you, you go somewhere for about a second. I've watched it happen probably 50 times. I thought it was modesty. It's not modesty. No, she said. It's a man waiting for the revision. The room did a great deal of nothing for about 4 seconds. I want to say something, and I need you to let me get all of it out, she said. Because I say other people's words for a living, and I am extremely bad at this, and it's going to come out wrong. Okay. On the first date, I said you weren't what I expected. She was looking at the bench rather than at me. You have decided that I said that because I had bad information. And I want to tell you what I actually meant, 7 months late, because I did not know I had to explain it. Georgia, Rosie told me you were solitary and married to the work, and I turned up expecting that, and it would have been Galfine because Finn, I'm quiet at 6 in the evening, and I have been described as cold by 2 separate men, and I was not looking for somebody who needed a lot. She finally looked up. And what I got was a man who is not solitary at all. He's just gone quiet somewhere. And I recognized it in about 40 minutes because it is the exact thing that happens to me every single day at 5:30, and I have never once met anybody else who had it. I did not say anything. That's what I meant. Her voice had gone somewhere. Not, you're better than the description. I meant, you're the same thing as me and I did not think I would ever meet one. I got up off that stool. I want to be honest that I did not do anything graceful. I crossed about 4 feet of a small room and she stood up into it, and there was a bench between us for about a second and a half, and then there was not, and something went off the edge of it, a movement holder, empty, which I found in the morning under a radiator. Neither of us said anything for a while. 7 months, she said into my collar. 7 months. You have been sitting on that since October. I have. Finn, I am a professional listener. She pulled back. I do this all day. And you have been running a whole silent process 18 inches from my face for 200 days and I did not catch it. And I want you to know that is going to bother me for the rest of my life. The sign went up in the window on the 4th of July. I want to be exact about the dates because they are the whole indictment. I made the decision on the 26th of June. I signed the paperwork with the landlord on the 1st of July. And a printer in Halverson delivered a 2-foot vinyl banner that said, Closing. Everything reduced. On the 3rd, and I put it up on the 4th of July at about 7:30 in the morning. Georgia found out on the 4th of July at about 11:30 from the window on her way to the chemist. She rang me from the pavement outside my own shop. There's a sign. I closed my eyes. Georgia, there's a sign in your window and I'm standing in front of it. Her voice was completely level, which by then I knew was the worst possible register. Is it right? Yes. When did you decide? The 26th. The 26th of June. A pause of about 3 seconds. We had dinner on the 28th. I know. Right, she said, and hung up. I want to describe what I had done, because I have had years to work out why it was worse than it looks. It was not that I withheld a fact for 8 days. That is bad, and I would defend nobody who did it, but it is not the thing. The thing is the order. Georgia Mulvaney found out about the biggest event in my life in 4 years at the same time as the town did, at the same time as the man who runs the hardware shop, at the same time as Rosie Keogh, who saw it on the 5th and rang me in tears. In May she had told me, at a bench, at real cost, that what she had recognized in me was somebody like her. And 6 weeks later, I had put the most important thing about myself on a 2-foot banner and let her read it off a window like a stranger. That is what I did. Not a secret, a demotion. She did not answer the phone for 4 days. I want to describe those 4 days because I did something in them that I had never done before, and it is the only part of that week I would keep. I did not go round. Every instinct I have said. Go round. Stand on the step. Explain the 8 days. Produce the reasoning. And the reasoning was good. I had it fully assembled by the 2nd afternoon. and it would have worked, because I am reasonable in person, and she had had a shock. And on the second evening, I sat in my flat and understood that going round with a prepared explanation is the same move as the banner. It is deciding what she should do with the information and then delivering it in a format I control. So I sent one message on the second day which said, "I'm not going to explain it at you. When you want to talk, I'll say all of it, and I won't defend any of it." She did not reply, but she read it, and she has since told me it is the reason she came on the 5th day rather than the 9th. On the 5th day, she came to the shop after closing and stood among about 11 boxes. "I want to say this properly, and I've written it down," she said, "which I have never done in my life, so bear with me. Georgia, Don't apologize yet. You'll apologize for the wrong thing, and then we'll have to do it twice." I shut up. "You did not tell me, because you have spent 9 months waiting for me to find out you're a disappointment," she said. "I understand the mechanism now. I've had 4 days and I've been over it about 100 times, and I do understand it." "That's exactly, and that is not what I'm angry about." She looked up from the paper. "I'm angry because you decided how I would react and then acted on your own decision. For 8 days, and then for 4 years before that with everybody else. That's not—" "Finn, you stopped going to a quiz on your own street," she said it flatly. "Nobody stopped inviting you. You decided what those men would think about a man whose shop was going, and then you made yourself scarce, so you would never have to find out whether you were right." I stood in a shop full of boxes and could not say anything, because she had just described 18 months of my life in 2 sentences and had got it exactly right and had not even been there. "How long have you known that?" "About an hour." She folded the paper. "I worked it out in the car park. I've been sitting out there since 20 past 5. You've been sitting outside for 40 minutes. "I have never once in my life said a difficult thing without preparing it," Georgia said. "That is what I do instead of being brave. So, yes. So, here is what I want," she said. "I don't want an apology for the sign. I want you to stop deciding what people can hold. I am extremely good at holding things. It is literally my profession, and you have not once let me do it. Okay? Say the whole thing, out loud. Now, the numbers, the landlord, all of it. And I will sit on that box and I will not offer you one single solution, because I do not think you have ever said it out loud to a human being." She was right, I had not. It took about 40 minutes. And she sat on a box and said nothing at all, and at the end of it she said, "Thank you." And then, after a moment, "That's the worst thing I've ever heard about Elise, and I would like to see it." "Georgia, wait. There's one more thing, and I've got it in the right order now." She waited. "I'm sorry I let you read my life off a window instead of hearing it from me. My voice was not doing what I wanted. That's the actual thing, not the 8 days. You found out at the same time as the man who sells screws, and I did that on purpose, because a banner is a thing that happens to a business, and a conversation is a thing that happens to me." Georgia Mulvaney sat on a box in a shop full of boxes. Say the last bit again. "A banner is a thing that happens to a business. A conversation is a thing that happens to me." I made myself hold it. I picked the one where I didn't have to be in the room. "Yes," she said. "You did. I'm sorry, that's the whole apology. There isn't a better version of it, and I've had 5 days to look." She was quiet for a moment, and then she put her hand out, and I took it. And neither of us said anything for a while in a shop that was not going to close after all, although neither of us knew that yet. She read it on a Sunday. I want to be accurate about what happened, because there is a version of this where a woman fixes a man's business, and that is not what happened. Georgia Mulvaney read a 19-page commercial lease from 1998 with 2 amendments in one sitting at my kitchen table with a pencil. Then she read it again. Then she said, "What's a service charge apportionment?" "It's my share of the building costs. It's on the schedule." "It's on the schedule," she agreed. "It's also defined in Clause 4 as being calculated on net internal area of the demised premises. And then in the 2011 amendment, somebody has changed the definition of demised premises to include the rear yard." She had the pencil on the page. "Finn, have you been paying a share of the building's costs calculated on a yard?" I had been paying a share of the building's costs calculated on a yard since 2011. The yard is 110 square meters. The shop is 58, in plain English. For 14 years, I had been paying charges on a yard I barely used as though it were part of my shop, and paying them on a floor area nearly 3 times the size of the place I actually traded from. Nobody had spotted it. Not my father, not me, not 4 different accountants, because everybody who read that lease knew what demised premises meant, and nobody went back to check what it had been changed to. That can't be right, I said. It's right. She was not triumphant about it. She was flat, which is how she is when she is certain. I read documents like this for a living, not leases, statements, transcripts, submissions, and the entire skill is that I am not allowed to assume what a word means. I have to check what it is defined as every time in that document, because in court a word does not mean what it means outside. And then she said, without looking up, "It's the easy ones, Finn. It's always the easy ones." I remembered a conversation about a menu from about 11 months earlier and had to sit down. Ring your solicitor on Monday. Do not ring the landlord. The recovery took 11 months, and I got back far less than I was owed, because 6 years of it was time-barred, and because the landlord's company disputed the 2011 amendment for 4 of those months. But it came to $29,000, which was to the dollar more than the shop needed. I want to describe those 11 months, because the money came through makes it sound like a resolution, and it was mostly an ordeal. The solicitor was cautious and correct and cost $4,000 of it. The landlord's company, which is not a person, it is 3 people in an office in another county, first ignored it, then denied it, then in the 4th month produced a letter arguing that 14 years of payment constituted acceptance of the terms, which is the kind of sentence that keeps a man awake. Georgia read that letter and said one word, which was no, and then explained why for about 6 minutes without raising her voice, and I have never been more attracted to anybody in my life. She did not do the case. I want that clear. She is not a lawyer, and she said so about 11 times. What she did was read every document that came in before I did and tell me what it said as opposed to what it appeared to say, which turned out to be a different thing about 1/3 of the time. "They're not saying they disagree," she said in the 6th month. "Read it again. They're saying the amendment was not intended to alter the apportionment basis. That's not a denial, that's a position about intention. They've already conceded the wording." She was right. The solicitor had not spotted it and said so. And through all of it, the shop stayed open, which took a decision I made in the 2nd month and which I want on the record because it is the first big thing I did the new way. I told people, not a banner. I went and told them. I rang 11 customers who had been coming to that shop for over a decade and said the position out loud. I went into the hardware place and said it to Chet, who has been next door for 22 years. And I went to the quiz on Larkin Street on a Tuesday for the first time in 4 years, and sat down and said it to 5 men who had been asking after me since 2021. Nobody said a single one of the things I had spent 4 years being certain they would say. Chet said, "Why the hell didn't you tell me in 2022? I'd have taken the yard off you. It's been sitting empty the whole time." Which is a sentence that cost me about $11,000 in rent to not hear. I want to be clear about the sequence, because this is the part that matters, and it is not the money. The sign came down on the 11th of September. Georgia was not there. She was at work in a courthouse 40 minutes away, saying somebody else's words exactly, because she had said, and I am quoting her, "That is your window. I'm not standing under it while you take it down. That's yours." She came at 6. I had the banner rolled up on the counter. "Well," she said. "Well? Are you going to say the thing, or shall I?" And I said it, because I had had 11 months to work out what the thing was. "I didn't want you to see me lose it," I said. "That's what the sign was. If it was a banner, it was just a business closing, and everybody in that town would file it as the trade dying, which it is. If I told you, it was me." "I know." "I'd have got there eventually. Probably about 2031. "You'd have got there in about 6 weeks," Georgia said. "You're not as slow as you think. You've just never had anybody wait long enough." We got married 2 years after that. Not in a hurry. She does not do anything in a hurry, and I had 11 months of being wrong about a lease and a lifetime of being wrong about myself to work through first. Rosie Kiev gave a reading. She also, at the reception, stood up without being asked and said the following, which I have thought about since more than any speech I have ever heard. I described these two to each other, and I got both of them wrong. I said she was quiet, and I said he kept to himself. And they were both true, and they were both the smallest thing about either of them, and I have thought about that a great deal in 3 years. She raised her glass. So be careful how you describe people. You might be right, and it might still be the worst thing you ever said about them. The shop is still on Larkin Street. It is not thriving. I want to be honest about that, because the version where $29,000 fixes a trade is not true. What it did was buy 4 years, and in those 4 years I did 2 things. I started servicing for 2 auction houses, which is now about half the income, and which I got by asking, badly, in person, twice. The first time was a disaster. I drove 90 minutes to a place outside Halverson with a folder of photographs and gave a version of myself I had rehearsed in the car, and the man was polite and said they had somebody, and I drove 90 minutes back. Georgia asked how it went, and I said fine, and she said, "Is that the real answer?" which is a thing she had started doing by then, and I said no and told her, and she asked one question. "What did you tell them about the shop?" "Nothing, it's not relevant." "Finn." She put her fork down. "You are the 3rd quill at that bench. Your great-uncle serviced watches in that building during a war. That is not irrelevant to an auction house. That is the entire thing they sell." The entire. I went back in the November with no folder and told them about my great-uncle for about 4 minutes and got the contract in the room. The second thing I did was start teaching it. 1 evening a week, 4 students, at the bench. 3 of them will not stick. 1 of them is 19, has hands, and will be better than me by 30. Her name is Hattie, and she found me because of the sign in the window. She saw closing on the 4th of July at 17 and came in on the 5th and asked whether it was true, because she had been walking past that window since she was about 11 and had never once come in. So the worst thing I did in this story is also the reason that girl is in the trade. I have thought about that more than is useful, and I have decided it does not cancel anything. It is just true at the same time. The Longines is still in the 3rd drawer. The man never came. I did the search properly in the end. Georgia did it, in about 90 minutes, using a record system she has access to and a level of thoroughness I could not match, and he died in 2022, 11 months after he brought it in a hospital 40 miles away. There is a daughter. She lives in Ohio. Georgia found her too and wrote her a letter and read it to me. First, and the letter is the best thing either of us has ever written, and it took her 3 drafts. I want to say what was in it, because it is the only time in 6 years I have watched Georgia Mulvaney choose every word of something and have it be entirely hers. It said who I was, and where the watch was, and how long it had been there. It said what had been done to it in detail, because Georgia decided that mattered, and she was right. And then it said, and this is the sentence she rewrote 11 times, "I do not know whether you want it. I want you to know that it has been kept running for 3 years by a man who had no obligation to do so, and that whatever you decide, somebody looked after your father's watch for the whole time nobody knew where he was." The daughter wrote back. She did not want the watch. She said her father had bought it for himself in 1971 with the first money he ever earned, and that he would have wanted it working and worn, and that if the man who had kept it wound for 3 years wanted it, it was his. I wear it on Thursdays. That is not sentimental. Thursdays are Georgia's heavy list, and on Thursdays I turn up at 6 with food and do not ask her a single question, and at some point in the evening she will notice the watch on my wrist and put her hand on it for about 2 seconds without saying anything. 11 years of saying other people's words, about 4 million of them. She does not need any words for that particular 2 seconds, and that is, as far as I can tell, the entire point of being married to somebody. Have you ever been described accurately by somebody who had no idea who you were? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.